I am sorry." "What is this?" Eleanor inquired, peering at the permission string on her screen, her gut churning as it always did when things did not match up. It was Thursday evening, 7:48 p.m. The office was mostly black save for the dim glow from her monitor and the ghostly reflection of her own face in the glass. A new override record had just arrived, the fifth this week, sliding through without the requisite dual authorization tag. No initials, no reason code. Simply override the approved Q2 CapEx update. She sat back in her chair and cracked her knuckles. They'd designed the system to prevent this nonsense. She had built it. Every single control flag validation rule, every tedious red tape barrier that prevented someone from simply punching a hole in the budget and hiding it behind language. And yet, there it was slipping through like melted butter. She executed the query again this time, verifying the metadata. The signature ID was linked to Marcus's credentials, but the timing indicated that it was sent in bulk, along with 3 other entries, all within the same 11-second interval. Nobody works so quickly, not even Marcus with his snake oil confidence and copy-paste governing style. She marked the entries, exported the audit trail to a local sandbox, and pinged Slack. Eleanor, 8:001 p.m. "Hello, I just discovered several overrides getting through without dual sign-off. It can be a configuration issue. Do you want me to check?" Marcus replied 10 minutes later. Marcus, 8:11 p.m. "Eleanor, I appreciate your concern, but we have things under control. These are the board-approved fast tracks. You can disregard them. Ignore them." She stared at that message for 30 seconds before copying the logs to her QA mirror, a small off-site archive she kept quiet for integrity testing, which no one ever asked about because no one cared about the logs unless something went wrong. Nobody cared about Eleanor Chase until they needed her to save them from their own lethargy. She did not answer to Marcus. Instead, she muted the thread, sipped the last of her cold coffee, and strolled back to her desk down the empty corridor. Her flats echoed from the tile, seemingly taunting her. The next morning during stand-up, Marcus delivered a brief discussion about reducing bottlenecks in the compliance pipeline. She knew that meant her. Then he smiled at her and remarked, "We're optimizing for trust. And trust begins with not complicating things." Several individuals chuckled. Eleanor did not, because trust does not ignore approval logs. Trust is not driven through a series of midnight entries that live just on a front-end dashboard, but not in the system of record. Still, she smiled, nodded, and took notes. Because as a woman in internal controls, particularly one who does not play ping-pong or flirt in meetings, you learn to weaponize patience. You do not raise your voice, you increase the record retention window. And right now, the logs were whispering a story that Marcus obviously didn't want shared. By the end of the week, there were 12 override entries displaying similar irregularities. Eleanor performed a diff analysis on the internal audit queue and the executive expenditure submission chain. That's when she noticed it. A line item for a strategic relations meal costing $412.38 was filed under an IT infrastructure classification. It had been approved, reimbursed, and buried via the same override path. She looked at it, blinking. Dinner for over $5,000, classified as server maintenance. She opened the attachment, which had a scanned receipt wine porterhouse dessert trio, 2 guests, 1 table, a waiter's letter. Happy anniversary, Marcus and Chase, and her surname, Eleanor Chase. Except Eleanor had never had supper with Marcus before. Her skin prickled. That's when something clicked. He was fabricating personal spending authorization under aliases and signing them off with her name. No surprise, he kept calling her paranoid. Paranoia provided an excellent cover when you were laundering through the guy who installed the locks, printed the receipt, and did not show anyone yet. Instead, she discreetly began replicating everything from Q2 onward. Approval logs, expenditure, exports, access logs, Slack threads, and calendar invites are stored in a nested folder called Sunrise Mirror, a private folder within her off-site QA archive. She grinned a bit more with each new override, knowing she wasn't just saving logs. She was collecting teeth. And Marcus, he was still beaming in meetings, calling her detail-oriented and swanning around as if the system was bent to his schedule. But systems do not lie. They do. And hers was about to begin speaking the truth. Her calendar appeared to have been ran through a paper shredder the Monday following the all-hands meeting. No invite syncs or cross-functional stand-ups. Her recurring Tuesday compliance review with Jordan was canceled. Her access was revoked at the Q2 Reconciliation Summit. She clicked about assuming it was a glitch. Perhaps they neglected to re-add her. Maybe IT ran one of those moronic auto-to-scripts again. She messaged operations. "Eleanor, it's 9:03 a.m. Hey, it appears like I lost access to a couple shared documents and project boards. Was that purposeful, or was it a system issue? Ops 9:19 a.m. Hey, Eleanor, I'm just following Marcus's role realignment. You mentioned that you are no longer on the compliance ops thread. Let us know if this is inaccurate." Alignment. She sat there for a bit, allowing the words to settle into her throat like a corroded screw. She then opened the internal account change report. Last Friday at 6:12 p.m., access rights were adjusted. Authorization: Marcus S. She was being frozen out gradually. The same man who told her last month that her frameworks are what make this place defendable was now removing her like a polyp. Marcus referred to her 3 times as a compliance bottleneck over the next 2 leadership sessions, once while evaluating the Q2 KPIs. To be honest, Eleanor's insistence on triple verifying workflows that have previously been approved by the board has contributed to some of the delays. We need someone who is more adaptable during headcount planning. Eleanor is sharp, yet she slows down. That level of paranoia does not scalable. Most chillingly, she was overheard through the glass walls of Conference Room C during a board prep session to which she had not been invited. "We are keeping an eye on her. She means well, but she's becoming a liability. It's as if she's preparing for a courtroom that does not exist." Eleanor did not flinch to storm in or call anyone out. Instead, she began screen recording her sessions, clipping Slack communications, and saving version histories from the wikis which were now being updated without her. She tracked every edit and every time one of her original control measures was rolled back. They desired a world without her boundaries. Fine. But she'd leave them a mirror so that when the train came off the tracks, they could see every loose bolt they'd yanked out. She added a new tab to her private archive called Messaging Trail. First, Marcus believes that paranoia does not scale. Control policy for 4/3/24. 2 days later, the policy is disabled. 5 days later, 8.2K in client onboarding expenses were routed without tags. It wasn't simply offensive, it was surgical. They weren't simply sidelining her. They were retrofitting her absence into the company's machinery. Marcus reworked her responsibilities in the organizational structure as operational compliance consultation ad hoc. She created the compliance pipeline, established the whole vendor escalation procedure, and implemented a change log review cadence. They were suddenly bragging about investor memoranda, and she was a footnote. She stopped asking for clarification. She began preparing for war. Every time they mentioned her name in vain, she copied it into a running document called Narrative Shift Indicators. When someone edited a document she had written, she saved the before and after. And when she overheard the CEO muttering operational worry during a board prep call while pretending to fetch snacks, it became a cultural virus. She did not cry. She smiled because viruses can mutate. Eleanor Chase was also learning how to become airborne. The email arrived in her inbox at 10:42 a.m., just as she was entering final comments into the draft of her Q2 compliance summary. Subject: finalized Q2 financials from Marcus S. for Jordan Leadership Executive Team BCC and Board Liaison. She wasn't copied CC'd or BCC'd. But one of the Jordan analysts, bless her quietly rebellious heart, forwarded it to Eleanor with a single line, "I thought you'd like to see this." Eleanor opened the linked PDF. Her breath halted halfway through the second page. It was the official Q2 disclosure package. Final, polished, branded already in board folders and ready for investor delivery. The expense notes were there, but they had been cleaned. The override summary she had flagged 2 weeks ago was no longer present. There's no mention of batch authorization. There's no mention of the unusual routing path she documented. There is no associated compliance appendix. The entire exception activity section had been erased. In its stead, there was only one sentence. There were no substantial deviations that required an audit review in Q2. She scrolled faster, her hand trembling with wrath on a tight leash rather than fear. She opened her draft from last night, which she had worked on until 1:30 a.m., triple-checking the phrasing because she knew how slippery Marcus was, but her file wouldn't open. The document is unavailable. The file path could not be located. She checked her automatic backups. The dated draft was present, but when she opened it, the last 3 parts had been changed with a line that read, "Restored from previous version." She checked the version history. The note next to the rollback read, "Rewritten, owing to a sync problem dated 7:12 a.m. by D. Sherman. It's a sync fault, correct?" She sat quietly for a long time, her gaze fixed on the line where her complete compliance summary had formerly resided. This was not an accident. This was a purging, and Marcus had made his move. He held the meeting without her and completed the financials without her. "I cleaned up the report because of her." She opened the changelog, took screenshots, exported the version history, and saved everything in her Sunrise Mirror archive. She then opened a blank email. To General Counsel at letters 1D450, 1D45C, 1D45A, 1D45D, 1D440, 1D45B, and 1D466 Company Com subject. Documentation. She typed the second quarter logs. "Hi, Counsel. As part of my audit preparation, please find attached the unmodified export of Q2 control logs containing batch override entries, as well as the original compliance summary. Prior to rollback, the data was timestamped and sourced straight from the internal system. Please confirm receipt for record-keeping purposes. Eleanor Chase is the best. She attached everything. Her original document, the amended rollback the logs with Marcus's signature ID, the anomalous approvals, the expense trail with the 4/12 anniversary meal, and even the Slack export in which Marcus referred to her as a liability in search of a lawsuit." She clicked the send button. Then she stood up, went to the break room, poured herself a mug of the burnt hazelnut sludge they called coffee, and looked out the window. From the outside, the office appeared peaceful, as if nothing had happened. Inside, she was a tremor dressed in formality. She knew what came next. It wasn't the day, maybe not even the week, but it was approaching. Marcus smiled at risk, as if it were a game. The CEO allowed truth to bend as long as the chart pointed up. Her absence had become convenient rather than alarming. They were not terrified of audits. They were betting that nothing would happen. She did not flinch. She did not pace. She just strolled back to her workstation, entered the email into her private tracker, and saved a final encrypted backup of everything to her cold storage device. It was only a matter of time. She wasn't bracing for the collision. She was watching the fuse burn. The email subject line read, "Team Update Strategic Realignment." Eleanor read it once, twice, and finally deleted it without clicking. But the announcement came, nevertheless. Less than an hour later, she was live streaming from the 14th floor conference suite where she used to sit 2 chairs down from the CEO when they still pretended governance mattered. She was standing on a little branded rug they rolled out for investor calls, grinning like a weatherman predicting sunshine in a hurricane. Today, he stated, "We are pleased to announce a major adjustment in our operational structure, streamlining for size and optimizing for confidence. Eleanor Chase will be stepping down from her post as compliance leadership to optimize for confidence." It was the type of statement that tasted like febrile illness and phony grins. It was a pause. A few investors muttered throughout the live stream. Then Marcus leaned into the frame, all confident charisma and no conscience. Let's just say he chuckled. Her paranoia was legendary. She triple-checked her own vacation requests. Laughter, politeness, thinness. Eleanor did not laugh. She was already opening the cabinet beneath her desk, slipping her laptop into its black neoprene sleeve like a coroner and zipping up a body bag. Her fingertips moved without hesitancy. She repeated the steps she had practiced for weeks, one at a time. Connect to the off-site QA mirror. Export an access report for her whole system profile. Compress the entire log archive. Encrypt with her private key. Upload to the cold storage endpoint. Vault C's final stage, a basic closing act, no vengeance. There are no theatrics, just an insurance policy hidden where no one would look. She didn't bother with the goodbye party, which was undoubtedly already being planned by HR. Something with inexpensive cupcakes and an e-card. Caroline and Ops' sympathy message went unanswered. Wait, is this true? WTH. She didn't rage or cry. She brought her coffee mug a framed portrait of her Hazel from her first violin recital and a half-dead succulent named Milo. Her face remained expressionless throughout. Eyes are unblinking, a glacier with mascara. The elevator journey down was silent. She stepped outside into the early afternoon heat, feeling the light hit her face like an interrogation lamp. Back upstairs, the leadership team was already reassigning her access to a 25-year-old with an econ minor and a LinkedIn profile that included the word ninja. They didn't grasp what she'd been protecting. They believed the logs were uninteresting, the receipts were noise, and governance was just something to brush aside with confident remarks and new PowerPoint presentations. But Eleanor knew better. She knew that systems remember everything and that regulators would soon do the same. She unlocked her car, slipped into the driver's seat, and took one final look in the rearview mirror. There were no tears, no second thoughts, only clarity cold enough to shatter glass. They assumed she was gone, but all she'd done was walk away before the AV Stevench. By Wednesday, the Slack channels had become a carnival of arrogance. Someone, most likely Marcus, renamed the internal compliance thread from #Eleanor Audit Review to #Ops Fastlane. A new emoji pinned at the top was a rocket ship next to a party hat. The first note underneath it said, "No more red tape, just green lights, vertical sparkles, let's move." Eleanor wasn't present to read it immediately, of course. Within 20 minutes after the announcement, IT had disabled her company credentials. However, people do talk. Screenshots leaked, especially when half of your coworkers privately believe you got screwed. One of her former data analysts DM'd her a screenshot. It contained a junior named Chloe whom she scarcely remembered. Claire inquired, "Hey, just curious, is there a checklist or template for approving overrides? Or did Eleanor just keep everything in her head? Marcus said that she kept it in 3 encrypted folders, 5 spreadsheets, and maybe a bunker. You will be all right. Simply use your head." The message included 7 laugh reactions, 2 fire emojis, and a clip of someone throwing paperwork out the window. Eleanor sipped her coffee, smiled faintly, and minimized the window. She was not angry. She was already working on the foundation of her new website. Chase compliance advisory risk is not bad. This is an avoidable risk. The phrase was not even hers. It came from a Fortune 100 auditor she had worked with 5 years prior when her work was still respected. The same fools who mocked her meticulous backup routines were now downloading half-baked policy templates from Notion and crossing their fingers. She wasn't surprised that her controls had been handed over to a young analyst. They always believe that audits are performed after the sky has fallen rather than to prevent the storm from occurring in the first place. According to LinkedIn, the new analyst Brandon has a BA in sociology, 2 internships in public relations, and a Medium article titled "How to Make Meetings More Fun." He had also recently been promoted to acting controls coordinator. The moment she saw the title change, she knew what was about to happen. They would skip the weekly test scripts, delete the rollback logs, and disable change alarms, not because they were malevolent, but because they were lazy. In a precision-oriented system, lazy people are the most harmful. Another forwarded mail appeared that afternoon. "Eleanor saved our quarterly control matrix 4 times. I discovered 3 copies in a deleted folder. Faced with joyful tears, am I being overly paranoid?" She chuckled. "Paranoia, please." She recalls the first time the company nearly lost $1.2 million because someone mistyped a procurement code and no one detected it for 6 weeks. Her paranoia had rescued the deal. Marcus had referred to her as a hero back then, despite the fact that she was a joke. Nonetheless, none of them appeared to understand one fundamental reality. You can remove logs from the system. You can mock the backups. You may gaslight the person who established the regulations. However, you cannot delete metadata from an encrypted archive that has already been sent to a secure off-site legal contact. They weren't picking up after her. They were excavating their own grave, smiling and wearing party hats on Slack. Eleanor pressed the publish button on her consultancy homepage. 2 hours later, she received her first inquiry from the assistant general counsel of a prominent fintech firm. Subject urgent, seeking an internal control advice. She read it slowly, smiled again, and opened her calendar. Let the kids play. The warning arrived in the legal inbox at 6:02 a.m. on Thursday. The subject line is in all capitals. Notice of spot-audited Q2 financials. Immediate action is necessary, sent from a Gov domain, stamped urgent, oh niceties. There was no advance notice, just a list of requested files beginning with Q2 control logs, timestamps, override approvals, user-level access reports, and full spending explanations for amounts over $2,500. General counsels and CTOs sweated through their silk shirts throughout this audit. Pretend their VPN is down. Marcus read it at 7:14 a.m. while eating a protein bar in the executive lounge, until half asleep. At 7:16 a.m., he messaged IT. Marcus, 7:16 a.m. A comprehensive sweep of all old system log archives is required. Clear out the old clutter. Especially anything marked for user purchase. Full cleanse. He even included a winky face, as if that would somehow sterilize whatever he was going to do. Within an hour, a junior sysadmin named Samir, who had never seen Eleanor, faithfully executed the command. I cleared the mirrored backups. I deleted the duplicate access directories, even executed a script to permanently delete flagged user history from the prior fiscal year. All of it was logged under the task of post-departure cleanup, which was approved by the CTO. What's with the irony Marcus believed he was eradicating risk? However, Eleanor had already pulled the fuse. 3 weeks earlier, following her leave, she discovered that her subscription to the legal team's compliance archive, which she had set up during the establishment of the risk audit pipeline, had not been removed. An auto-forward rule that is undetectable in the user interface unless you know where to look. There is a buried settings tab called Legacy Routing Deprecated. The audit notice arrived in her inbox at 6:03 a.m., 60 seconds after it did in theirs. She was standing in her kitchen barefoot and buttering toast. She read it, reread it. Then she discreetly opened her laptop, sipped her coffee, and watched as the dominoes began to line up. At 7:22 a.m., another email arrived from General Counsel to the executive team subject. Urgent log status for the Q2 audit. Do we have a clear access path for overrides? Marcus, can you ensure that the logs Eleanor utilized are still intact? Marcus responded 8 minutes later. We had duplicates, but I'm informed they've been resolved. No risk. Legal stated that Q2 had already been approved of. Eleanor smiled, because Marcus, in his infinite confidence, had not just approved a delete. He confirmed the removal of evidence after a regulatory request had already been made. That's called an obstacle. That is prison if you are not rich level stupid. She accessed the encrypted drive. Go to /vault/c/internal/quarter2/every log override and routing deviation. Still present with timestamps. With hashes. Version histories reveal rollback attempts. She didn't have to do anything yet. No grandiose gestures. She simply copied the entire folder to a new disk, placed it gently in a padded envelope, and set it next to her laptop. Allow the firm to appear they have things under control. Allow Marcus to delete the only backups he ever knew about. She had one rule for every role she had ever held. If you're going to be the vault, make sure there's another vault that no one sees. Her phone vibrated. Text from a former Jordan colleague. 2 words only. Shit is being stirred. Eleanor simply grinned and opened her consulting inbox where 3 new queries were already waiting. The storm has officially started. She hadn't even opened her umbrella yet. The audit call began at 10 a.m. Sharp cameras on and no pleasantries. 3 federal regulators, all stone-faced and graying in government-issued lights, entered the Zoom from the same backdrops. White walls, shuttered blinds, and a constant buzz of power. They didn't blink for social cues, didn't need to bluff, and were masters of the long, lethal pause. Stephen, the CEO, maintained his customary theatrical calm. Pale blue button-down top button open mouth curved in a semi-permanent sneer as if he were holding a TED presentation rather than facing a government audit. Marcus sat next him in one of those starkly minimalist home offices. Clean shelves, a plant bookshelf stuffed with unread management theories. Stephen began the meeting with a quiet chuckle. Of sure we are pleased to work together. We take compliance extremely seriously here. The lead auditor did not laugh. He just clicked the pen. Then let's start with Q2 control logs. Specifically, override history spending explanations and anything over $2,500. Stephen turned to Marcus as if they had practiced it a dozen times. Marcus leaned forward and rested his elbows on the desk. Unfortunately, due to an infrastructure move in early Q3, certain legacy logs are no longer accessible. We changed systems and retired the previous architecture. The migration plan included the deprecation of some archives. There was no blink, no hitch in the voice, only pure, slimy, suit-clad certainty. We do, however, have a simplified financial packet that our legal team has already reviewed and signed off on. I can discuss that now. He made a click on his screen. A PDF started to load, polished, sanitized, and currently under legal assessment. The lead auditor looked up expressionless. There are no raw logs at all. Marcus grinned as if explaining to a youngster why dinosaurs don't exist anymore. Nope. Purged as part of a larger efficiency initiative, fully authorized. He continued. We've moved to a more agile system, so our oversight protocols are now leaner. The regulator turned to Stephen. You confirm as CEO that your organization does not have access to Q2 control records. Stephen nodded. Correct. We have confirmed internally. There is nothing left to review. Another pause. Regulators exchanged glances. You could feel the weight of what was left unsaid, like a little ajar door in a burning building. However, they did not push. Not yet. The lead auditor only said, understood. We'll take note of it in the early results. He clicked his pen again purposefully. The meeting has come to an end. The call has ended. Marcus leaned back with the smug contentment of someone who believes he has just bluffed his way through the final checkpoint. Eleanor, 5,000 miles away, was seeing everything unfold through a grainy Zoom recording that had been accidentally forwarded. She assumed, based on the legal team's automated compliance digest, that she was still discreetly subscribed to via her long-abandoned access pipeline. She did not smile. Not yet. She simply sat completely motionless, her mouse lingering over a single file in her protected archive. /Vault-C internal Q2 logs unchanged, zip finger over the button. Just one click away. The feeling was not one of adrenaline. It was not wrath. It was purer than that. Anticipation, because it was now on record. Marcus had lied. Stephen had also done so. And when the regulators looked beyond the glossy PDF and asked the appropriate follow-up questions, they discovered a procurement code off sequence. Or when someone else forwarded her final email, the thread snapped. She wouldn't have to yell. No need to call a liar. It would be unnecessary to remark, I told you so. She had already informed them. All she needed to do now was wait. One more heartbeat. It occurred on a Tuesday, 3 days after the audit call, when the office was unusually quiet and the air was excessively still. It's the kind of day when horrible things happen like slow-moving smoke, thick and inescapable. General Counsel Anthony Nolan was on his third espresso shot when he decided to finally sort through the backlog of flagged internal mails from the previous quarter. Most of it was foolishness. Vendor contract disputes, spam filters are misfiring, a dozen urgent Slack escalations regarding password resets. Then he noticed the subject line. Documentation. The Q2 logs were from Eleanor. She was free to go at 8:12 a.m. No response. There's no forward. There is no reference in any follow-ups. Just sit there. Quiet. Unopened. Anthony clicked. The message was short. Polite, sterile, high counsel. As part of my audit preparation, I've included the unaltered export of Q2 control logs containing the batch override entries in the original compliance summary. I've been stamped and sourced directly from the internal system prior to rollback. Please confirm receipt for record-keeping purposes. 3 files were attached as part of the best Eleanor chase. Override Q2 log in complete CSV format. Original PDF for the compliance summary. Approval chain metadata in JSON. Everyone came with a digital signature hash. Each one is validated. They're almost all radioactive. Anthony's throat dry. He opened the CSV first. It was exhausting. I'm stamping override entries associated with Marcus's login. Some people were executed in questionable batches. 2 entries lacked a related authorization record. One expense entry was obviously routed using a misclassified vendor tag. $4,912.38 were logged under IT procurement, along with a ticket for bone-in ribeye and wine pairings. He opened her initial compliance summary, which was supposed to accompany the Q2 report. It described the issue she had identified, outlined the consequences, recommended corrective actions, and was clearly marked Draft Submitted, Do Not Remove. He rubbed his temples and sighed. Then he carefully swiveled his laptop toward Marcus, who was sitting across the table munching on a bagel as if he'd won the Gotham jackpot. "Look at this," Anthony murmured, his voice sandpaper low. Marcus leaned in and read the subject line followed by the text and attachment names. He froze. His face did not shift abruptly. It shifted like wet paint, cracking first the brows and then the jaw. His hand hovered above the trackpad as if touching the file would detonate a bomb. "Is this?" he began. Anthony remarked, "She sent it the morning you fired her." "It is all there. The log's version, history, deviations, everything the auditors requested." Silence. Anthony then continued calmly, "You told them the records did not exist." Another heartbeat. Marcus blinked as if attempting to reset his own memories. "I assumed IT had revoked her access, but it had not." "No," Anthony responded. "She emailed it using her company account. You removed her version from the system, but she kept her own, which you never inquired about." Across the room, Stephen stepped in, coffee in hand, fully clueless. He wondered what was going on, judging by the expressions on their faces. Anthony moved the screen to face him. "You may want to sit down." Stephen did not sit, instead, staring at the television, his lips parting slightly as the enormity of it washed over him. Eleanor had not raised her voice. She had not threatened. She hadn't gone to the press or vented online. She had merely sent the truth to the one location where it could not be ignored. And now the truth was slowly blossoming like a slow poison in a closed room. The ball was no longer in her court. It rolled beneath the boardroom table and began ticking. Eleanor was nowhere near the office. She was sipping coffee at her kitchen table, watching the early sun spread across the floor. Her phone vibrated once. An email notice. Subject: FWD Q2 documentation is urgent. She did not open it. She simply leaned back, eyes steady, and whispered to no one. Checkmate. The regulators asked to reconvene less than 24 hours after the General Counsel forwarded Eleanor's email. Subject line: urgent. Supplemental meeting request for Q2 documentation. No preface or agenda. Just once, a link and 3 other names were copied to high officials from the Office of Corporate Oversight who only showed up when paperwork turned into perjury. The call opened like a guillotine. Same regulators, different tone. "I appreciate your time." The lead auditor began, eyes fixed. Additional materials not previously provided were reviewed, specifically the whole collection of Q2 control logs and internal compliance paperwork. Marcus blinked quickly. "I was told they didn't exist anymore." The lead auditor handed up a printed copy of Eleanor's final email, time-stamped the morning of Miss Chase's departure, and delivered to your general counsel, which contained the exact records we needed. Stephen, the CEO, leaned forward, attempting to grin. "Look, something went wrong at the handoff. We were dealing with some rogue retention concerns. Legacy systems can be challenging. Are you stating for the record, as the regulator did, that your senior team did not deliberately remove records following a federal request for them? After that, there was stillness, the sort that peels the skin." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, and tried again. "We assumed they were duplicates," he murmured. "Older versions. Eleanor was a known over-archiver, and we assumed you thought a documented compliance officer's backups were irrelevant." Stephen jumped in, hands out like a guy directing traffic during a cyclone. "We never asked anyone to delete anything deliberately. It was a misunderstanding. At worst, there is an internal training lapse." The second assessor tipped his head, unconvinced. "Your CTO approved the deletion on the same morning that the audit notice arrived. M. Chase's cleanup has been labeled." Stephen's jaw twitched. "That label is misleading." Anthony, the general attorney, eventually spoke gently. "Clearly, I cannot justify that." Stephen and Marcus both snapped at him. Anthony did not blink. An audit request had been received. The logs had been given to legal, yet the deletion was nonetheless carried out. That is an exposure to which I will not insulate. I recommend you both get independent advice. The camera captured it. Marcus's face folded inward and his shoulders collapsed. A man watches his career end in 1080p. Stephen attempted to speak, but all that came out was air. The regulators said nothing else. They didn't need to because the evidence was louder than any pivot or spin. Eleanor wasn't around to interrupt this time. She did not need to be. She was already on another Zoom call this time, calmer, cleaner. Miss Chase said the woman from the Office of Corporate Oversight, which is putting together an independent compliance panel for corporations with more than $250 million in annual revenue. We would like to retain you as a consultant based on your documentation protocols and system architecture. Eleanor nodded once her tone calm. I would be pleased to help. There's no drama, no flair, just legacy molded into leverage. Eleanor sat at her desk later that evening while the company's Slack disintegrated emergency PR calls went out across time zones and the board planned an emergency leadership transfer. She opened her laptop, reviewed her agency onboarding documentation, and scribbled a note to her Hazel to bring additional resin for her 3D printer. She didn't gloat or read the newspapers. She just opened a new folder and named it Client ZOA 1 Advisory Former Employer because this was not vengeance. This is what happens when the vault you shot retains the key. Inside that key is your future. Thank you for joining in the Fun Office Survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flipping drama. Let us make your former coworkers sweat.